Ayomide here, and guess what? We're back for more incredible journeys into the lives of everyday heroes on the World Without People podcast. Dive into more vibrant stories, shared experiences, and mind blowing perspectives with me in season 2. New faces, new stories, but the same old vibe. So, whether you're a seasoned listener or just stumbling upon this oasis of humanity, welcome. Grab your favorite beverage and join the adventure. Let's celebrate the beauty of the world, one remarkable story at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The World Without People. My name is Ayomide. I am excited. I am always excited. But today I'm very, very excited because I get to talk to Dami. And she's very shy. So you people should just give her a round of applause wherever you are right there. Hi, Dami.
Hi, good morning. Well, good morning or hi everyone. Terrible.
Yeah, no worry. It's going to
No,
be perfectly fine. It's just our regular catch up. That's
okay.
all. It's just a conversation, a regular catch up. Except, funny enough, some of the things I want to ask you about, I feel like I've never asked you about in depth. In depth. Yeah,
Yes.
it's come up in
Well,
conversations, but so that kind of thing. So I'm kind of actually looking forward to it. But I have a question for you first. Do you remember how we first met? Because I do not remember. I've been trying to recall.
I do, but before I
Oh,
answer, Nala is in a very playful, happy mode. She's
okay.
gonna keep speaking. Should I stop her or is it fine?
No, she's fine.
Okay.
Let the dog
This
have her
is life on a
fun.
Saturday morning, everybody.
Exactly.
How did we meet? We met at NEA, the Nigeria Entertainment Awards thingy. I want to say it was before I graduated, so I was still at Howard. So I want to
Okay.
say it was possibly 2008 or 2009. I think
Okay.
they usually have them in the around the summer.
Yes.
And I know that because I had visited Rolayo for Christmas, either my first year in the States, which was seven. So that would have been Christmas of '07 or Christmas of '08. I don't remember. And she had talked about you, but we didn't meet.
Okay.
And so we met. It was kind of like, oh, that's the Relios friend, whatever, whatever. So we met there. Did you know Kenny at the time, or did I introduce you to Kenny? Because I was there with Kenny, I think.
Kenny in
Kenny,
Houston?
yeah,
So that's it. So that's now I'm confused. I assumed it was through Rolayo, but
yeah,
I didn't remember it was at NEA. So if it was NEA, that means that was the one we drove down, me, Rolayo, Essay. So we drove down from Ohio to New York because that was in New York, right?
yes.
Yeah. So if
I think
anything, I
Reliant was
probably
there,
met.
but I just know that was like the connection, the Toledo, whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay. So then I probably met Kenny there because I didn't end up going to Houston until after that. And that was
yeah.
when I knew that Kenny was friends with Debbie. So, or at least they knew each
Interesting.
other.
And also another thing that's coming to mind, but I don't think you were there. I think whenever I was visiting Rolayo in Toledo, we drove to Pittsburgh. And I think I met
Mm.
Essie. I don't know, God.
Sherry. So you
But
have met Sherry there. Sherry's the one in Pittsburgh. Essay is the one in
yeah,
was the one in Ohio.
yeah. So
Okay, okay, okay,
that
all
was,
right.
that was the whole like it was just like, oh, I know you or I've heard about
Yeah,
you and
yeah.
stuff.
No,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So whether it was 2008 or 2009, that's what. Sorry, my math is not math. No, 20 years. So 16
Oh, not
years.
20 years.
No. I'm going with my own math of I've been here for 20 years. So
Yeah.
I was trying to walk you back. So what, 16, 15 years, and we've known each other for 16, 15 years. I want to say embarrassed, but it's not an embarrassing story. She's just not gonna hate it. I'm gonna have to tell you guys something that forever endears me to Dami. I'm sure she remembers it, but she doesn't consciously think about it. There's a time, and I'm sure I've told you guys the story. I have been broke in this America. Like, forget whatever you're seeing. I was quite literally homeless at some point in this America. And Dami just called me one day and she's like, God told me to give you my paycheck. Like, and I think it was an entire paycheck too, for that matter. And I can't tell you how much
I
that saved
remember
me.
that.
You don't remember that, right?
No.
Yeah, so and I feel like that's the great thing about some of these things, right? Like I remember, I'll be talking to my best friend and she'll be like, oh, but you did this for this person, you did, and I'm like, how do you remember that? Like I don't even remember that. And so that's the great thing about life, right? And so yeah, no, quite literally saved my butt that entire season, whatever that was. And so if I have never said it, and I'm sure I did, but I'm saying it again, thank you.
Yes, you
You
have.
know.
Very thankful.
And she used to live in New York. Now she's a Cali babe, and we had so much fun in New York. We had so much fun in New York. We did such random things in New York. Really, quite literally, so much random things. And life has taken us different places. I'm doing my doing my thing here in Jersey. She's all the way in Cali, but I thank God that we can still make this happen outside of just the podcast. But the idea that we can still be friends 15 years later, it's quite literally one of the greatest joys of my life. So, anyways, let us get into the not so hard questions, but I think it's something we haven't really talked about, and I wanted to hear from you. With again, like I said, a relatively hard question. Dami and her siblings lost their mom when they were quite young. And I just wanted to talk about that because I've never, other than my cousin that I was there when that happened and everything like that, I don't really know a lot of people who've done that, but are able to talk about it, or who've gone through that, sorry, but are able to talk about it. Obviously, it's many years now, throughout school, I just was aware of it, but we never went into what was that like? What was that like growing up? What was that like, as the first child? What was that like, with your dad? What's that like when you think about milestones that, are happening, like when you turn 30 and things like that, and you're not, mommy's not there, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to hear from your perspective.
Well, that is a big question. Yeah, so actually, timing is interesting because yesterday we buried my grandmother, my
Mm.
dad's mom. She was 102.
That's awesome.
And I didn't go to Nigeria for a few reasons, but I struggled with potentially going because she was buried in the same place that my mom was buried.
Mm.
And we haven't been back there since she was buried in 2000 and no, 1998.
Mm.
So almost 30 years now. So it's been a
Mm.
while. Where did I start? Okay, so my mom died from complications in childbirth. There was a bit of an emergency procedure that they had to do when she was having my second brother. So a whole lot of people don't know that I actually had a third sibling. So she passed away from complications. It was the heart rate was dropping. They had to do an emergency surgery. They couldn't. They saved the baby, but a little too late. So he had complications his whole life, which was quite short. And she unfortunately sort of bled out. That's kind of what I heard. Don't know all the details. I was in school, so I was in boarding school when it happened. I think I was in GS1, GS2. I was quite young. A friend's dad drove to school to pick me up and, just called me out of dinner, study hall. I don't remember. It was in the evening, I think, or late afternoon, and said, I needed to go home. And he didn't say what happened, but I think I knew. I remember I don't know how long I stayed. I don't remember if I went back to school because this happened in October 20th. So it was definitely not the end of school. So I don't know how long I stayed, but I remember we were living in Lauren at the time, getting to my cousin's house. My grandmother was there. My mom was her only child, her sister, my cousins, and, they sort of broke the news. I'm not a very emotional person. I think most of my family, and my siblings too. Maybe Omotara is like the closest to like emotional. Like we're very
Yeah.
stoic, I
Hmm.
guess. And I think in that moment, and in a lot of moments since then, when big things like that happen, I react practically first, and then process my emotions later. I don't tend to process my emotions in public around other people. So I think when they told me, I wanted to know where my siblings were. Fijimi was 7 at the time, or even 6. He was 7. Yeah, I think he turned 7. So I kind of just wanted to know where they are. And I think we found one another and just went to someone's bedroom and just kind of sat there. There was a lot of dramatics in the house. And yeah, so that was it really. There was a like we lived in the same town as my cousin, so I think eventually we went to the house. There were a lot of people in and out of the house, which is something that like my backstories have backstories, and I feel like we don't have enough time. But
Yeah, time
long
for
story short, I've only ever had one real birthday party in my life. It was my first birthday, and I
it.
hated it so much, and I was able to articulate how much I disliked it that my parents didn't bother throwing a birthday party for me again. So having a lot of people in the house, going in and out, was very uncomfortable. I remember that. I remember hating that. And there was a baby.
Mm.
Right? So in the middle of all of this, there was an actual baby. So my grandmother stepped in, my aunt, cousins, and like I said, I don't know if we knew at the time that he had some development issues, but he did. He had severe, I think it was cerebral palsy. I don't know what the exact terms were. It wasn't treated very well, or it
Mm.
wasn't treated very comprehensively before he passed away. So there was a lot going on. What was the other thing you were asking about? Just how I felt, milestones. I think my mom, she wasn't with us long. I was barely a teenager. I wasn't even a teenager when she passed away. But she had such a strong influence and presence that even now, like, I still sort of feel like I'm under her influence. So, did I miss her? Yes. But I never felt like I lacked a mother's guidance. Like
Mm.
I always knew what to do, what was expected. I still remember how responsible she was, like taking care of herself, her career. She was 36 when she died. I think she was I don't know if she had become a judge or she was about to become like the youngest judge ever in Kwara State. She was a magistrate at the time. So she had been in court like she had, for years and years. She was very strong woman, very strong character, very industrious. Like she was a judge, but we had a poultry and we had a farm, and she worked. She had a lot of things going on. She was friendly, but she wasn't out there partying. I remember her like being very like intentional about like what Ashrabi she was buying and all those things. So I feel like she carried us along without being necessarily like this is how you do this and this is how you do that. I just knew what she was about. I know my siblings and I, we all have different experiences. So I never felt like I lacked that guidance. I think the one time that I mean, sometimes like when I see my friends with their moms, at least the ones that we grew up with, like
Yeah.
not like it, like I remember, like there's that gap, right? But honestly, a lot of people stepped in. Like my friend's moms, like her closest friends were Rolayo's mom and my other friend Bisola. So I think they all went to secondary school together or something. And so they, their homes were our homes, their moms were our moms. Like there was never a gap there. I think when Tara was getting married, Bisola's mom kind of was like, mom, like, that's okay and all of that. Like
Yeah.
it was not even a question. Like she was taken care of. But I think I felt a little bit, and maybe when I get married,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe I might feel that. But I've never felt alone in that sense. I do miss her, but I just feel I don't know how to explain it, but her presence is just so strong in everything. So it doesn't feel like I lost much. I'm in a lot, which I was planning not to do. With my dad and like co-parenting, I mean, you have a mom and you still, I feel like you co-parent just as much. So
Yep.
I don't know if it would have been that much different, but I definitely had to grow up, right? And I don't know that I did a good enough job because I was actually thinking about it. I tried not to like over prepare because you sent me like some things we were talking about. I looked at it, I was just like, okay, let's leave it alone. I know that we all had different experiences, my siblings and I, with this loss. I was already in boarding school. So
Yeah.
when the dust all cleared, I went back to school.
Right.
and I was able to sort of put my head down and continue. I was good at school before that, but there was definitely like, wow, she's here. Like, I don't think I got a B after that
Mm,
until I graduated college. It was just
mm,
like, I became very focused on like things.
yeah.
Um, but I know now that like we all had different experiences. My brother was still in primary school, barely, so he had to live with other families.
Mm,
Um, our youngest brother, Emmanuel, like needed round the clock care.
mm-hmm.
So, there was that. And then Tara, I think she had a few years of school left. She was with our cousins and then she went to boarding school. So I think as it relates to the relationship with my siblings, I think we all had a little bit of a going away to process and heal. And
Yeah.
then in the last 10 years or so, we've like sort of come together and become a unit again.
Yeah.
Like we talk
Yeah.
about it, celebrate the anniversary. We're like our own band of robbers. But it
Yeah.
wasn't, oh, we weren't super close. We didn't process it together. And then with my dad, I think my dad was, let's see, he was born in 58. So he was 40.
Okay.
I didn't feel like 40, man. Such a baby boy. Yesterday was also his birthday, which is, update to birth, and he's 66. So I think he was a little lost.
Mm,
Mom was definitely the backbone. He's an engineer, he's a civil engineer, and then he was very active and he would go away for, weeks, months on these like work sites. And so, when you're used to kind of having someone at home kind of taking care of the home front and you can
mm,
go and work and sort of be the breadwinner. I think they were co-breadwinners. I know, yeah. Another story for another time. Was a little lost. It definitely was hard on because all of a sudden now you have four young children.
yeah.
You have to provide for them. You have to take care of them, and the way that to provide for them is to be gone and like
Mm,
go on and on these work sites and do stuff. So I think he was definitely a little lost, and maybe in my youngness, I just kind of picked up on that, so I
mm.
stepped in. So you there's a little bit of a gripe between the siblings that I'm his favorite. I don't think that I'm his favorite. I just think that I've been the most like sensitive to him needing support. And so I've
Yeah.
kind of always been like his right hand,
Yeah.
you know, like starting to take interest in like the other kids, like this person's school this and this and that. I don't know, maybe I'm rambling. Ask me specific questions, but that's kind of where we all were now. Where are we now? I think we're in a great place. Like
Mm,
everyone's doing well. I think there's always healing that needs to be done when you lose a parent. There's always a bit of that gap that you sense and try to fill with, either people come in and fill the gap or you try and, fill those gaps yourself somehow. But I think we're doing great. I don't know. All right.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the podcast, please don't forget to hit the subscribe, like, or share button. Whether you're on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or YouTube, your support helps us to reach more people. Stay tuned for more amazing conversations, and thank you for being a part of our community. No. It's so funny. I think as you were talking, I was thinking about, and I think I've heard somebody say that, marriage ends in a loss one way or the other. So whether it's divorce or death, it's a loss, right? And I think this is the first time I thought about how a divorce, sorry, not a loss, death, basically death, right? So you know how you say, "For better for worse till death do us part." And so I was just thinking about how in a way, divorce is a death because quite literally all that you're saying, I could just see myself there, except my mom is still alive. Like that's the only difference. I mean, it's a huge difference, don't get me wrong. But I could quite literally see all those things you were saying. That especially when you talked about the fact that you all went your separate ways. One of the things I just came into a realization to a couple, I want to say just the past 2 years, was the fact that I left and came to America while my siblings kind of had to be in that position and still see everything that was going on through the divorce. So because like again, they're younger and they're living in the house and all that, so I think I'm just getting it now because I used to think, no, you've done this and you covered them and you you know all of that and you realize that no, you had different experiences. And so to your point about coming together. So honestly, it was very interesting to hear you talk about that, knowing that I can't even obviously step into that shoe. But wow, a lot of people are dealing with loss, yeah, from different kinds of death. But I think obviously nothing more poignant than not even being there to be able to call, not being there to be able to ask. And you said something that I think is really important, that and something I'm going to take as a parent, that from the beginning I show, and from the beginning I take my children along and not have to almost always say, this is how you do, this is how you do, this is how you do, because life is short, there's no guarantee. And so you want, god forbid that your kids know who you were. They're not questioning it, they're not questioning what you would say about the situation and things like that, because I feel like that's what I've heard from the few people that I know that have lost someone, or even just seeing some of it on social media, and like feeling like they don't know what their mom would have done, and all of that. So no, that was actually quite perfect. Okay, all right. So now I'm also realizing, no, well, actually, a couple days ago, your sister put it up, that this whole thing about what do you call your mom's friend's child, and then they said, cousin. So I didn't know that you and Walayo were not actually cousins all this while. It wasn't until she put it up the other day. I'm like, wait, what? Like I thought you guys were.
But
I'm like,
never like you
okay.
did.
I'm like, okay, you know
So
what? It's fine. It makes sense. I have a few of them like that. Like, I have a few of them like that, but I did not know that. So, like, I thought you guys were blood cousins. And then your other friend, I forget her name, that is
Bisola.
Bisola. Oh, God. I didn't, I'm just thinking about it now. That's who Bisola is, the tall Bisola. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I didn't know you guys were not actual cousins. That is
Yeah,
so
our
crazy.
moms were, and the funny thing is, so we lived in Ilorin because my mom
Yeah.
was from Kwara State, and so she worked at the state court. But we spent most holidays in Lagos with
Mm.
our posh cousins because I always thought they were like so posh. Because I'm just a village girl from Uganda. But they all had their kids kind of around the same ages. So me,
Yeah.
Rola, and Bisola, and then Tara, Deo, and Desola, and
Yeah.
then me, Rolake, and Fumi
Yeah.
were kind of. And then my mom actually, just she waited for the fourth. So she
Mm.
and Rolake are kind of the same age, and then
Mm.
and yeah, so
Yeah.
who knows? She should have kept the trend.
I'm going to jump around because I mean, I sent you something just to satisfy your, oh my gosh, my anxiety about,
Look at it.
I mean,
After
I'm
the
going to
first, I
ask,
was like,
I'm going to ask you a million questions. So it actually brings up a point or a thought that I had, because one of the things you had talked about was being the single friend. First of all, I don't know what that means, because for me, I'm like, a friend is a friend, whether you're single, whether you're married. Like, it just really depends, right? But, I have some close friends that, their children are going to be teenagers by the
Mhm.
time, if God willing, I have kids, right? And in fact, Annabelle is what, 12 this year, right? So, for example, I was having this conversation with Demi, and I was like, well, they have to call them auntie or uncle, or like, it's not one of those ones where they can now do cousins. So he's really arguing about, no, they can't do that. They're, and I'm just like, it's a little bit interesting, because let's just assume God is merciful. 15 years, that 14 years gap, like, now you can't just be saying cousin, like, except you just want to say cousin this or cousin that. Like, I'm like, you gotta put some respect on it. I don't care that it's my friend's age. And to your point about single friends, I feel like that's the only way I've ever thought about being a single friend. But I know you maybe more than me, because I don't know, somehow maybe a lot of my girlfriends aren't married, right? But I know that a
Mhm.
lot of your girlfriends are married. Where do you see that there's a gap? Because I remember my friend Bookie too saying this the other day, like, you're in a different boss, or you moved, and I'm like, I don't really see that. I don't really understand what you're talking about. But what
Yeah.
have you felt? Maybe because I haven't really felt it. I'll be honest. It's my guy friends that have gotten married. A lot of my guy friends, but because they're guy friends, it was always like, okay, live your life anyways. Like, we're still friends, we're still cool. But I didn't feel a gap.
Well, I think when I put that on there, I was definitely just spitballing things, but it's a newer experience for me. Yeah, Bisa and Rela have been married for a while, but I mean, we've never been friends. We've been
Mhm.
family,
Family, yeah.
so it hasn't changed our dynamic much. But I will say now, I mean, even just thinking about the college set, because those are the people that I've spent most of like my
Right.
mid adult life with. They're all now married. Now, all my Nigerian friends, like close, pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah, are married. Most of my non Nigerian friends are not. But it's definitely shifted the dynamic a little bit in that I think, at least, especially when people are newly married, it's a very big shift for them, right? And this is me like what I've put in my journal and what I'm saying now is it's probably different. But again, I had the benefit of like processing it and like coming
Yeah.
out on the other side with like a balanced view. So when people get married, it's a very big shift for them, right? Their everyday experience is now very different, right? They're fighting different battles. They're adjusting to this new thing, and it doesn't matter how long they dated, whatever. Like, just after that, I do it just it changes, and so most people are not able to continue to relate with you the
Mm,
same way that they were before they got married,
mm,
right? Like we're not, and like there's all that, and it's a bit of this like, okay, you have a steady friendship, and then things get really heightened when someone's getting married. Like
mm,
for a year, it's all about them, right? It's
mm,
about the wedding, all the events,
mm,
about leading up to the wedding, all of that,
mm,
and then there's this. I think maybe there's a little bit because you're now like a little bit emotionally starved from
mm,
like your usual friendship, and maybe there's
mm.
the expectation that like once the wedding is over, at least we'll become friends again. You start asking, "Oh, what's going on in your own life, by the
Yeah.
way?"
Yeah.
That doesn't happen because now
Mm,
all of a sudden your life's kind of gone back to normal after the wedding, and then their
mm,
life changed completely.
mm,
So, and it happened for me sort of, I think between Aisha got married January of 21, or
mm.
no, maybe that was Lola. Between 2020 and last year, everybody got married.
Yeah.
So it was like a cycle of showers and getting ready for the wedding, and then the wedding, and then showers and getting ready. And I had a bit of a period of mourning the
Mhm.
loss of everybody because
Yeah.
all of a sudden everyone is fighting different battles, and then
Mhm.
here I am. And
Mm.
my life was not changing, right? In
Yeah.
the last 2 years, I've lived in 3 different countries. I've lived in
Yeah.
4 different cities.
Yeah.
I've changed jobs,
Yeah.
things have happened, but I didn't like I wasn't the subject in the group chat
Yeah.
anymore,
Yeah.
right? And so I had to sort of deal with that. And
Mm.
yeah, at first it was like, well, what's all this? Like, how can everybody just like, but then, like I said, starting to process it and being like, okay, people are going through a whole thing that, I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily the first person that they would talk to about that stuff,
Right.
right? You're figuring out what am I only talking to my husband about, and then most likely you're looking for the advice of like other married people, and so yeah, if yeah, I don't know, it's different. Like
Yeah.
friendships are still great, and like we still get together, and my friends are awesome. Like they still, I think my friends know what really gets me and is that surprise element of surprise, like knowing that people got together, talked about me, and decided to do something that would
Mm.
be really nice and they still do that. They still get together and do that. So it's not like I'm forgotten or I feel forgotten, but there's definitely a bit of a shift. And yeah, so.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I thank you for your honesty on that. Again, like I said, my experience, I had so much more guy friends that got married, especially within a space of a number of years. But I always knew I wasn't their main person. And so even I had one of my guy friends actually be mad at me because it's like I cut him off. I'm like, well, you got married. I just assumed you were going to cut me off, right? So in that sense, like, the constant calls or whatever was never that. But in that sense, I've also been very lucky because my guy friends, again, because they're guy friends, were also just intentional about still being friends. I mean, it wasn't, there were very few of them that I was talking to every day, anyways. So they've
Mhm.
always kind of been conscious about that. And I hadn't seen it on the other hand. But again, to the point, that was one of the things I was thinking about in picking you as a bridesmaid, right? Let's just, since we're being very vulnerable and open here, because I was just
Oh,
like,
for my bridesmaid proposal, but okay.
I know. I owe you a bridesmaid's proposal. I mean, to be honest, like I do not do a bridesmaid's proposal except to my
I
siblings.
know.
Except to my siblings, just because again, apparently I'm being very
You didn't
transparent today.
ask me, you told me.
I hadn't even thought about my siblings because I didn't think it was a requirement. I'm like, I don't want to stress them. I didn't want to, and I think that's maybe the way I think about it. Like I think about stress. I think about the things that will cause people to like go out of their way. Like I'm so very conscious about those kind of things. So I was like, I know what she's been through. I know it's been a heavy year. And I again, I sense this question that I'm asking you. I sensed it because you've, like I said, back to back to back. Whereas that's not been my experience. In fact, I've been dealing inversely with a lot of people who are, leaving marriages or fighting in marriages or things like that. And so I was like, I'm not going to put this stress on this girl. And then eventually I was just like, okay, girl, like, I don't think you cannot do with this. And I was just like, and I think she was like, are you asking me a question? I'm like, okay, fine, oh, fine, oh, fine. But, I thank you for that because I think for me, I want to be conscious about that. I have, again, very, I don't want to say very few, but I have quality friendships with my friends. And I want to make sure that I don't get into that bubble. Because I used to hear that a lot from other
You can
people.
control it, and I don't think you should have to. I mean, I will probably get into the subject of friendships because we've talked
Yeah,
about friendships a lot. Like, you owe it to yourself and to your marriage and to the new place in life that you're going to be in to put in the work and the attention that it needs.
right,
It's a new relationship.
right.
We have a 15-year relationship. You and
Yeah.
this, yeah.
Wow. Wow. I'm going to tell him to come and catch you.
He still hasn't asked me either. So
What?
like,
Oh,
you
okay.
and so I guess I'm at a point now where I can be mature enough and be like, it's fine. You
Yeah.
need to do what you need to do. I know it's like it's this two-way street, right? Like
Yeah.
your single friends can come to a place of understanding, or your friends post
Yeah.
marriage,
Yeah.
single or not, can come to a place of understanding that this person's life has changed and
Yeah.
like they need to put the time
Yeah.
and whatever they need into this new relationship. On the other hand, it's also on you to be intentional about, okay, now that what's going on?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what's happening in your life? How can I still show up for you
Yeah.
in the middle of all my goings ons, right? And maybe that's what happens when people like, oh, this person ghosted me after they got married or whatever, is that give and take of like understanding, but also intentionality on both parts, right? Because if I'm being honest, like I've also been a little bit like I could be a little bit better about like what's going like, but I don't want to be like what's going on in your marriage, but like I was telling someone a couple weeks ago when we were with her, like I was a little bit salty about how I felt, a little abandoned after she
Yeah.
got married. And I'd voiced it to other friends, but I hadn't come to a place where I wanted to talk with her about it. And then when I did, it was just kind of like, you've been a little bit like off in your own world. I get it. I want to know what's going on if you want to share, because I know like maybe trying for a baby and all of that. Like, I'm not going to ask you in a way that makes it feel intrusive,
Yeah,
but if you want to talk about it or whatever,
yeah,
here I am.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
let's have a drink. Move on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things I think of is you and I, for example, we don't talk every day, we don't chat every week. We typically just have make sure we catch up. And then when we catch up, it's also being very open and vulnerable about whatever it is, right? And I think for me, honestly, most of my friendships are that way, except maybe one or two people. And so for me, I can be in, I think, I mean, I hope that I can be intentional about following that method, right? Now, to your point about there are a few people that maybe that was the relationship, it's more a constant thing. I, you know, yes, the person has to understand, but do you think that there's a place where you also maybe have your partner understand? So I'll give an example of my best friend BJ. BJ as a guy, you would think that, oh, he will get married and then, I will no longer be a priority. But in fact, BJ is the one that will be like, I've not heard from you in a week now. Again, we were never everyday friends. But I
Mhm.
think being the one to even push, even like, I feel like if like he knows that I've not spoken to Debbie or Fumi because I normally talk to them every week. He should be like, what's going on? Is everything okay with your relationship? Right? I think there's a part that your partner plays with that. What do you think?
Yes, but also it depends on the relationship in your courtship, maybe. But yes, I agree. Maybe I'm gonna pick on BC because she was the most recently
Yeah.
married. And I think my speech on their wedding day was kind of like I was her soulmate first.
Yes, that's what Fumi said she was going to say. If she gets the mic, I told her I'm not giving her the mic.
But I think Leke has come across as being I think he recognizes that she had a support system before him. And he's very much about like go on your girls trips,
Yeah.
go hang out with your girls. And so he said that to her. He's sort of said that to us.
Right.
So yeah, I think it just depends on the partner. It depends on how you present those relationships to your
Yeah.
partner,
Yeah.
right? If they think that those things are important to you and they value, what those relationships provide to you, then they will probably articulate it. But people are different in like how intuitive and like how they pick up on things. I mean, life's crazy. You can't pick up on everything. But yeah, I think it definitely does that. And they might do it in private, they might do it like I said, we all still get together, like we all still do our thing. And you know maybe the partners are cheering it on
Love it.
in private and don't know it. Like, I'm
Yeah.
also very shy, so I'm not like in everybody's husband's face trying to be their best friend. Like,
Yeah.
why is your husband adding me on Instagram? I'm gonna-
Fair.
I'm
Fair.
also a little bit like, I put my walls up
Yeah.
first. You have
Yeah.
to mantle them.
No, so speaking of friendship, I like how, because all the friends she's mentioned, it's not like I have them on my phone, but I know every single one of them. The same way she knows all my friends. And I think that's the one thing, I don't know that a lot of people have this. I feel like people expect that all their friendships to be together. And I've never been that kind of person. I don't know. It's kind of weird. My circle gets larger and larger because I know everybody in my friend circle that are not necessarily my best friends, if that makes sense. So sometimes I'm texting somebody, oh, say happy birthday to her. It's not because of any, like, it's your friend. But I find that a lot of people are, they don't like it. So, okay, let me give an example. Debbie says that every of my friend thinks that they're my best friend. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I'm,
Oh no, we all know Debbie is number one. She
but and I think that's what I like. My friendships are separate and best. I don't know how else to say it, right? Obviously, she has more years, 20 years. Fumi will tell you that because we've been through the worst of times. So, so there's that. So I don't know. Like, I think it's very interesting that people tend to be jealous around friendships. And so again, whether it's a friendship with your guy who ends up being the person or whatever, I don't really understand that sentiment. And I'm not sure if I'm just being shallow, like I'm just looking at things on the surface, I guess is my point. So what do you think about
Mhm.
the depth
So,
of
I
friendships
mean,
in that way?
I'm definitely like that. Like, I have my Toronto friends, I have my
Mm.
London friends, I have my college friends, and like all of them are like, but my friend in college who I don't even, so do you know, did you ever know Uche as my friend at Howard?
Mm.
Yeah. So Uche was like my best friend at Howard from like sophomore year until she graduated. I think she graduated a year before I did, but we were like inseparable. And a
Mm.
lot of don't even know who she is. But she thought of me as her friend, but she never knew if I could like thought of her as like my friend,
Your
right?
friend,
I don't have a best friend.
yeah.
I have a sister, so
That counts.
everybody, I'm like, I have my sister. But I think you and I have a similar experience in that because we have such big spaces, and it's not even intentional. Life
Right,
has just moved us around a lot,
right,
and like we are relationship driven people, and so whatever space we find ourselves, we're gonna like collect some few friends, and like it's not like we have many, but like
right.
go deep in a few scattered spots, right? That's why you're able to like go to almost any major city anywhere and like have a friend there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm anyway. And people kind of get jealous about that. It's like, oh, you're with those other friends. Like when I lived in London in when was that 2000 and 2022? Like
Hmm.
I had people. My cousin Dupa was there. My friend Angie. Like all of a sudden I just had like a whole new crew that like I ran around with, and then my
Yeah.
friends back were like, oh well, you're with those your friends. But I I think that's testament to the fact that like there's so much love, like we're
Mm.
capable of holding so many people
Yeah.
in, and you don't necessarily have to be like in each other's like everyday rhythms to
Yeah.
be really great friends. Like you figure out the important things. You're connected. As I'm saying that, my friends from Toronto, two of them just texted me. I wonder what's happening. But like so yeah, I get there's always a little bit of tension. Like we always joke that like it's gonna come down when I get married and all the friends
Ooh, child.
all the people who heard about one another for
Yeah.
years and years
Yeah.
and years and like actually never really intersected.
Yeah.
Oh, we tried it once when I turned 30. We had a
Mhm.
birthday dinner in New York. You weren't even there. I guess they were like, we're not inviting Nife. But my college friends
Yeah.
and my New York friends, like most of the people like I went to Hillsong with or
Yeah.
whatever, like together to do a dinner. And it
Yeah.
was very fun for me, like
Yeah.
watching because there was all that like our Dami like
Yeah.
thing, like this one we were like we know what she likes and like
Yeah.
whatever in the group, and it was like my little Dr. Evil, like ooh, this is so
The
so
difference
fun for
between you and I is that I am that simple. Like everybody's like, "Oh, what does she like?" And everybody's like, "I don't
doesn't
know.
like anything. She
Coffee.
doesn't
She likes coffee." And so everybody's asking me questions. I'm like, "I don't." Like people, I know that people are legit confused as to what is the thing that you actually like. I'm like, thank God, I'm very, very simple. If it was
yeah.
Dami, I would have had to be thinking about, does she want to go on a trip? Does she want shoes? Does she want bag? Does she want an experience? I see confusion much. Like everybody should be like me. No, no, no. Everybody can be like me. It'll be boring. But no, no. I think that makes sense. I think that obviously we all know that chief bridesmaid, is that what it's called? Is Tara. Everybody else would just be it would be the largest group of of bridesmaids ever.
I mean, most people think I'm going to elope, so they're most people are expecting there not to be a wedding, but we'll see.
So why expect not to be a wedding? No, I think you'll do something. I think it'll just be somewhere far off that, what if you don't get visa, then sorry, it wasn't my fault. But then I don't know too many of your friends that have visa issues now. Thank God. We've, we fought the good fight. We've come up on the other we've come up on the other side. And so in fact, let's go back to some of that as well, because I know that part of this whole work situation, like you mentioned earlier on, moving so many times, was the loss and disappointment and all of that of career. And like you said, you were somebody that you never got a B again after that. I know you to be very high achieving, right? But sometimes you can do everything that you are supposed to do, and somehow, like, life, I guess. Or maybe in that moment, I sometimes wonder if it's God teaching us things. Because how can you be like, with work, you're so diligent, and all of a sudden you're let go? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, God, what are you trying to teach me? What is the point of this? Is this that you're trying to take me out of my comfort zone, or all of that? But I know you've gone through that, so let me not say so many times, but there's been a few years of that kind of topsy-turvy with work. And that, I think, for me, in your case, is more from a place of you were reaching the highest of achievements and levels in that career space, and it's almost like something comes to just kind of like makes you, I don't want to say go down, because down is not the word, but it just changes your perspective a little bit. So how did you go through that?
Uh, I'll try and keep the backstory short. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm a storyteller, so
Yeah, please,
picture this.
tell the story.
So, first scene in the story is me in a courthouse. I don't even think you know this. Me
Mm,
in a courthouse in California, actually, funny enough. I think it was the first time I ever, no, it wasn't my first time in California. Me in a courthouse in somewhere in California, holding a marriage license, about to marry somebody for papers. And then, like, it was all signed. And then I called a friend, not even a friend that you would expect. I think I
mm.
called Imelda. You
Okay,
know,
yeah, I know about.
I don't even know why I called her. I called Imelda and I was just like, I can't do this. And I walked away.
Mm,
This was February of 2017, I think.
mm,
So what had happened up until that point? So I started my job out of college. I was at UBS for 3.5 years. I was an associate director, and then I was recruited by someone that used to be an MD on our team, and he needed people who kind of got it around him. And they'd made a bunch of promises. I was like, I was 3 years at UBS. I was about to start the process of like converting my visa to a green card. So it was like, I really like this green card is guaranteed. These are the pay, like sort of the pay milestones that I wanted. All of that was sort of agreed to, wasn't in writing, which I've
mm,
learned my lesson.
mm.
All of that was agreed to, and I joined the firm. The pay stuff didn't go as promised. There were conversations. And then when I started asking the questions about green card and like, this is feeling really shaky,
Mhm,
um, the conversations kind of changed a little. So by the start of 2016, it's like, this is not working out. They realized this was not working out too. We sort of had a plan in place that we would go our separate ways that year. So I started looking for another job. But then because we had some departures on the team, they actually came to me and said, hey, we need you to stay through to the end of the year, and we're going to pay you a full year bonus. Because typically you get a bonus if you're at the firm the following year on the day bonuses are paid. But they're like, we'll guarantee a full year bonus. We just need you to stay until the end of the year. So this was actually in writing. So I signed that I would be there until December 31st, 2016. And when you're on a visa and you sort of separate from the company that's sponsoring your visa, you have 60 days to leave the country,
mm,
or you can apply for an extension, right? So the company lawyers like worked with me. Yeah, there were reasons like if you have family or you have property, blah blah blah. Like there are things. So I said, well, luckily I had property in the States, an investment property. So it's like, yeah, I need time to like unwind my investments, whatever. And so that's why So someone's mom, actually, this wasn't me. Like someone's mom was like, "Oh, we know somebody in California. She's like
Yeah.
gonna help you like marry somebody so you can stay." And like, I was kind of still in like a fugue state, so many things going on. And so that's why I bought the ticket and I went. And I remember getting there and just being like, no,
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. So I flew back, didn't have a plan, was still kind of, interviewing, trying to find a job. Honestly, was also at a point where I didn't think I wanted to be in investment banking and finance and that world anymore because we'll talk about it. Like a whole different environment. So I think around March, April, um, Moni, my
Mm-hmm.
friend, we connected and she mentioned that she was sort of starting the process for Canadian residency. It's like, oh, what's that all about? Whatever. She was like a month ahead of everything. And I was just asking, oh, so what did you do? And then I would do the steps because that the one thing, like I was fine. I mean, first of all, like I had the money because they paid me a full year bonus. So I wasn't financially like in a place where I was desperate for
Yeah.
another job. The only thing that I remember being desperately like,
Yeah.
I was just like, I will not be a single girl in Nigeria.
Yeah. Amen.
And
Amen. Amen. That's my
that
thing.
was the
That
biggest
is
thing.
my
Like
thing.
before the end of December, like I remember I got a 5-year UK visa. Like I did
Yep.
the whole extension, like to extend my stay in the US. It was just like, I'm not gonna go back to Nigeria without a plan. Like it was the scariest thing to me out of everything.
Yep.
So that's why the whole Canada thing, like it wasn't like I was still looking for a job in the US, but it's just like if I needed to leave the country, I wanted to have options. Like even if I go to Nigeria, I had the UK visa, I could like
Yeah.
escape. I just couldn't see myself doing that. But all that got resolved. I met my former boss at my prior company around April of that year. So, I had the extension. So they granted me an extension to stay in the country for a little longer. Met him. And the first thing after the first meeting, well, later he told me, like, before he met me, he was like, we're hiring this girl, whatever it
Right.
takes. But after
Yeah.
that first meeting, he goes and he fights a lot of people and like, okay, the visa situation is not great because like Trump had just become president end of 2016. So it's like immigration is going to be tough.
Yeah.
But we have an office in London, we have an office in Toronto. We're
Mm.
going to like try and figure out a way to like get you to one of those places
Yeah.
until we can figure out a way to bring you back to the US.
Mm.
I was very happy to be like, well, that's nice because I'm in the process of getting residency in Canada also.
Yeah.
So, if I had known that he was like going to hire me at all purposes, it wouldn't have taken like 5 rounds of negotiation on my
Yeah.
pay. Like I continued going, but like it took a while because it was at a point where this was July. I needed
Mm.
to leave the country like almost immediately. We were still
Mm.
negotiating my pay, and I
Mm.
just kept saying no, like
Mm.
because I'd seen it's like when you've looked at the barrel of the gun, it's
Yeah.
like I had a chance to like get married for papers and like let
Mm.
this one like give myself. So I felt like I had nothing to lose. So it actually put me in like a stronger like position
Mm.
after that experience with work. Now every new job prospect, like I approach it with so much confidence. Like I don't care, like you
Yeah.
either meet me or not,
Yeah.
and so we negotiated that, and then it was very nice because I signed the papers just after my birthday, and the lawyers were like, well, it's going to take a few months because of the whole Trump immigration whatever for you to be able to start. So it's like, okay, nice. I'm heading to you guys send my papers to Nigeria when you're done. And then I went to Nigeria for like 5 months and had
Yeah.
the time of my life. So I it was hard in the moments. Like there were lots of interviews and like again, because I'm very structured, like I every day it's like, okay, I'm gonna do like progress like 5 ongoing processes, like follow up with people, whatever, 5 applications. And then after I did that, go out
Yeah.
and do whatever I wanted. And so it was kind of like I had a job and then I was enjoying New York, like catching up with friends, like seeing the city and all of that. Looking back now, I mean, my visa issues have given me the opportunity to like live in all these countries. Like, why did I live in London? Because I had to get another H-1B to start this job. And in order to do that, they started the process in March, but the visa wouldn't be ready until October. So they're like, well, do you want to, you can come to the London office and start. So initially, I wanted to be there for a year, actually. Like, I was hoping that the visa kind of, there was a too long, but there was a way that the visa might have been delayed where I would have needed to be in London for a year. So now I look at it as like the visa issues have just given me all this opportunity. So I
Yeah.
started in Toronto. It was supposed to be a year, but my boss and I had such a good relationship at that point where I was like, hey, if I stay 2 more years in Canada, I can actually apply for a passport here. And he was very on board with that. It's like,
Mm.
absolutely, you should stay. So it became opportunity. It was hard, it was painful, it was scary at times, but honestly, the most scary part was just like going to Nigeria and like I just I've never really lived in Nigeria as an adult, so it's all secondhand,
Yep.
but scariest thing.
I mean, I think I agree with you 120%. I've always wanted to move back, but my thing was I was never moving back on my own. I just knew that because, I mean, the truth of the matter is, after being here 20 years, you're, or however long since I've been here, you're as American, especially, at an adult age, right? You came at an adult age where all the processes you learned about work, about school, about doing business, about all of those things compared to
And my
Nigeria,
parents asking you,
i-
why?
like it's like no. So even thinking about living there now, it's like, yeah, I mean, I know that I'm Nigerian, but I know that, you know what, the Nigerian processes will be dealt by somebody else. No, not me. I have to remain as American. It's not even I have to, I will. It's just part of who
It's
you've
who you
been. You
are
can't.
now. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you have to be reasonable. And so to your point, I always tell people move back. But as a female, unfortunately, I mean, Nigeria is still a country where you can't rent a place on your own. I mean, except you're buying it as a female, right? Yeah. Otherwise, you have to be explaining story. Like, I don't want to explain story to anybody about why I want to live where I want to live after living in, like you said, so many states, so many countries. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I hear you. I do have something to say though. So coming back to work now, I feel like I should fight you because I feel like there are some investment and financial things that you could have taken me through, even as broke as I was. Like, tell me, put $50 here, put $50 here, and again, it goes back
We
to
need to
friendship.
have this conversation. Go on.
To be fair, maybe I could have also asked. I guess my brain wasn't thinking about it like that. But friendship is very interesting because when you're in certain seasons, sometimes you need that friend that helps you to forget. And just going to Dami's house was enough for me to forget. Like, it was just going into the city, you get to see wonderful view, you get to see wonderful things. You're not even thinking about anything serious in life. You don't even want to think about anything serious in life because you know what? Life will life. But now that I think about it, sometimes I'm like, damn, girl, you could have taken me through all of that or whatever. So now, like, now there's that feeling of being behind, right? In that financial sense sometimes that I'm like, did we and again, it's maybe not you particularly, it's just Nigerian. Sometimes I think because we don't even do I don't even know what my best friend makes. I'm the kind of person who would say what I make, but like neither of my friends, they would never mention it. When I'm the kind of person saying, "Oh, this is what they're trying to get me to pay. I need to take. What should I do?" Like that's how I think about things. I'm that transparent. But most no, it's not. I don't know what anybody else makes in life. Like
Yeah.
nobody talks about it. Nobody has that conversation. People just tell you what they do at work and all of that stuff. But I don't know. Is it a Nigerian thing? Because sometimes I think that's been such a what's it called to me, like a what's the word? Not disbenefits is not a word, but whatever. It's not helped me, and it's now been other people who now said, okay, do this, do this, do that, and just out of like random ass conversation. So they're the people that I normally call now when it comes to financial things. Even though I have friends, that have been doing that have been in this industry, maybe not as long, but still the same that could have carried me along. So I wanted to just talk about that from that place of one, Nigerians, are we doing ourselves a disservice? That's the word, when we are not asking our friends about financial slash work kind of, take me through. Basically, let me put myself in your hands and take me through as you're going through that journey, what you're learning, teach me. And how can we do better as friends? Like, obviously, now moving forward, anybody who's younger than me, I try to take them along, or I try to be, yeah, anyways, thank God I'm transparent enough that I want to pull them along to say this is what I'm doing. But how can we do better, I guess, is the long story that I'm saying.
Well, before I answer your question, let me clear the record because maybe 1% of my friends, Nigerian or not,
Mm,
know what I actually do for a living.
exactly. Exactly.
So we should start from there. So I do work in finance, and I've kind of worked for either investment companies or like investment banks or investment companies my whole career. What I actually do has really nothing to do with personal finances, one
Mm,
first of all.
mhm,
So I'm very much of a student and learning it now as you are,
mm.
but I've had the benefit of having the resources
Right.
that is sort of kind of worked itself out up to this point. So what I do, actually, I have a new job now. So what I'm doing now is not something that I've done before, but simplistically is companies hire. uh, I help investment companies, private equity investment companies raise money for big funds. So just to simplify it in context, so I work with a group of people all over the world. We know our job is to get to know institutional investors. What are their investment programs? What kind of returns are they trying to make? And what would they like to invest in? And
Mm,
because we have this group of people that has this knowledge about institutional investors, and when I say institutional investors, I mean firms that have at least minimum of like $50 million to invest in a single product at any single time. So like we're talking like the state pensions of California, like
right.
really big insurance companies, like the not LeBron's money manager, but the person that manages all the, like as much
NBA.
as all, like, so big pools of capital. So because we have people like that, there's like 10 of us on my team that know investors like that all over the world. A private equity fund manager. My specialty is people who raise like real estate or infrastructure funds. So real estate funds, like the people who build these large apartment complexes, industrial farms, big wind farms, like solar projects, like really massive projects. So they're trying to raise 500 million, 3 billion to like do these big projects. They come and hire us because the investors help us figure out what investors can invest in our products. So now my job is new. Like I own pretty much all the relationships on the West Coast. So if somebody is an investor that's based in Montana down to like Arizona and West and Western Canada, is my job to get to know those people and
Mm,
like figure out what products work for them. And before that, I was sort of a junior person on the different companies that I've been at, putting together like decks and like presentations and like numbers and what are our returns, like how can we show that like we're the better company compared to all the other companies running around random. So that's what I do for work.
mhm.
Has nothing to do with investing 401k. It has nothing to do with like putting money away. I can't invest in individual stock. Well, I
Yeah.
can, but because we're presumed to have more knowledge or like just more familiarity with these things, like they restrict us
Right.
from being able to access investment. So like, and also all everything that I do is actually regulated by the
Mhm.
SEC and FINRA. So I'm technically not even allowed to tell somebody this is what you should invest in because it's investment advice and like it can come back and bite the company that owns my license, all that stuff. So all that to say, like what I do day to day literally has not. I can tell you like what the 10 best real estate managers in the US are doing, but like which house should I buy and
Yeah.
where? Actually,
Yeah.
that's my friend. So when I said I had an investment property, like my
Yeah.
friend, he and I are business partners in that. Like he's always loved real estate, and he'll
Mm.
send me the model and be like, "This is the NOI of the." I'm like, "Are we gonna make money?" Yes. how much how much do I need to put in it?
Yeah.
18K. Okay, let me see if I can gather that over the next whatever. Here you
Yeah.
go. I don't want to hear about it. Tell me how much I make. Like, so I'm quite not uneducated, but like not as invested in all that financial knowledge as I know I
Mm.
could because of like where I am in
Yeah.
my in the career. But it's just like work takes up so much of like my mental whatever that a lot of the other things like it's just like I don't need to know all that. I don't need the details. But that said, because I've been lucky to like at least have had good compensation,
Mm.
right? So when they were like, "Oh, here's your 401k, the company is going to give you like a 4% match."
Mm.
Like if you put in 4% of your
Yeah.
pay, up until this year or maybe last year, I didn't even like I never looked at like, oh, this is the max 401k that I can contribute, which is like 23K or something like that.
Mm.
So I never contributed the max. Like
Mm.
I mostly did like, oh, 4%, okay, what's gonna be my net? Oh, maybe I can do 10%. Like I never like I was just lucky. Like the numbers worked to
Yeah.
a point where I didn't need to like be as cognizant of the detail,
Right.
right? When I was in Canada, like I had all this money sitting in 401k, but because I wasn't earning in the US, I could have converted all of that to like a Roth
Wow.
IRA, which means like
Mm.
you don't pay taxes.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until I was studying for like my Series 7 after I'd come back to the US starting this job,
Yeah.
right? Like, so I've never really paid as much attention, to be honest, to it as possible, which is like, honestly, like I kick myself sometimes. But again, I'm fine because
Yeah.
like the little I've done, and just to give you like, I mean, maybe sharing too much information, but just to give you between 2011 and 2016, like those first years,
Mm.
based on me, the company matches and all those little things, maybe like I put in like maybe 50K in in retirement accounts.
Mm.
That stuff is worth like 180 now,
Mm.
right? And I kind of kicked myself because I'm like, if I had done all the maxes and I
Yeah.
divided, said 120, which is like 20K for each of those years, which is like what the max is,
Yeah.
who knows what that would be now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So financial, like it's something that I'm learning about now from
Yeah.
like, what does it do for me?
Right.
Honestly, those days I was just trying to survive and like
Yeah,
get through my
that's what I said.
like just, do read the headline and do the
Yeah.
embarrassment. So it's something that I'm actually starting to take more of an interest in now.
Mm.
I agree with you. We need to talk about it more because
Yeah.
like someone's gonna hear that. Hopefully, I'm not being too transparent, but someone's gonna hear that and be like, "What?
Yeah.
Like, just like invest a little bit, leave it alone, and like
Yeah.
it just if
Yeah.
I don't touch that stuff in 20 years, it could be a million. It could be more
Yeah.
than a million. And it
Yeah.
was 50 years and years ago,
Yeah.
right? That didn't really pinch. Like I just kind of
Yeah.
it came out of a paycheck. So
Yeah.
I'm starting like we definitely need to talk about it more in like as simple terms as that as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
What do what do they match? What are you putting in?
Yeah.
What are you like, it doesn't even matter what I'm I couldn't tell you what those things are invested in. They're somewhere doing something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's time, it's compounding, like those are the things. I do have the real estate stuff that I started doing with my friend. Like I've talked to some friends about it. Like I forced BC, for instance, I'm like, bring 5K. We're buying this property in Texas.
Yeah.
This is gonna be your share. Like I'll account for it, whatever. And like she knows I'm good for it. So she put
Yeah.
it when we sold the asset, I gave her a breakdown of everything and like gave her her share of it. So I've tried to do that a little bit. Maybe I could do that more. But again, because I'm not the one doing the homework, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm cool with this person. Like if I lose some of the money, like it's fine, but I just want people to I've started wanting my friends to at least get in the rhythm of like
Yeah.
the investing. My friend Sade and I think are probably the closest. I don't think I've ever really told anyone how much I make. I can tell
Mm.
you off camera
No,
later.
no, 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 no. It's not even a thing. I mean, like I said, most people are not comfortable about it. So I just mean in general of even being able
Not
to,
uncomfortable. I'm not uncomfortable about it. I
yeah,
think it's just like it's probably never come up. Like everybody just people assume that like you make a lot of money because like you
yeah,
work for an investment bank.
Yeah.
I can say I pay a lot of taxes.
Especially in America, single, and in California too. Yeah.
Yeah, I pay a lot of taxes, but we've started talking about it because like and like I don't want to get into too much detail about it, but like I actually made a big financial mistake last year that like I'm working with a friend who actually is a personal financial advisor now. And
Mm,
I want to say we've had at least 10 hours conversation on this in the last
mm,
3 or so months because
mm.
I'm now at a point where I'm like, explain it to me again.
Yeah.
Tell me again. Okay,
Yeah.
what if this, what if this? Like, I want to know what happens, what's the process for doing this? Because
Yeah.
I'm now wanting to get educated about
Yeah.
it. Because before it was more like, let's just do this. But like, I did something where it was like too big of an investment for what I needed it to be. And he's like, yeah, you're paying too much. So before I go and like unwind the mistakes that I'm making. All that to say, I'm also getting educated myself,
Yeah.
but I love this stuff. Like I've seen how you can build wealth
Yeah.
by, and I know it starts with like people need to make enough to like have a living to be able to
Right.
like invest and like plan for the
Yeah.
future. But what I can say, maybe not you because you're not excessive. What I can say is that most of us spend way too much than we need to in the current,
Yeah.
and I don't necessarily have that. Like I like nice things. You can see the design bag somewhere in the bag that I use as decoration. I like nice things. I figured out how to not make them cost more than I need them to cost. Like everybody's like, "Oh, you bought your first Chanel bag." It's like it's the only Chanel bag. I just bought it when a lot of my friends were not at a place to buy it, but it was like 5% of my income at the
Yeah.
time. It was like a gift to myself, being like, I've suffered at this company. Like, I'm gonna do something that I like,
Yeah.
right? So, what I can say is, and when I start have conversations with my friends about that stuff, and I start probing their spending,
Yeah.
a lot of people back off.
Yeah.
Like, I have friends that like fudge the details of like, oh, I
Mm,
didn't buy it, it just happened, kind of thing. Because
yeah.
like I'm also that like mom firstborn, like we're
Yeah.
gonna get into this, like I'm gonna tell you some hard truths. And like
Mm,
honestly, like people don't really want to hear it. So if we're like, oh, I want to
mm,
have investments, like you're like, are you willing to like not go on those girls' nights and like not eat or like maybe cut down on those trips or like
yeah.
stop buying so many shoes and things like
Mm,
that. And
yeah.
a lot of us are not like we kind of want to have our soft girl life and also build for the future. Which anyway, financial
Um,
class next one.
yeah.
But we do need to talk about it more,
Yeah.
but maybe because of my personality also I prefer to be asked than
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
so please ask me. I'm sorry if I did it. But
It's,
also I didn't know better. Like
yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know so much.
No,
Maybe I
that's
should.
helpful to know. No, that's helpful to know. I think that you made a good point. I mean, for the longest time, I was just trying to survive. Honestly, like quite literally up until 2022, I was just trying to survive. So I didn't really, I couldn't even have told you. I mean, and now obviously there's points where you're like, okay, maybe you could have made the sacrifice even if you're trying to survive. And I think that's the one thing that I've learned. And if I can share that with anybody, it's that. Like you can make the sacrifice to put $50 every month in an index fund. Like all you need to put into an index fund, I believe at the time I started was then put $50 every month or whatever I was putting, and it was able. And and to be fair to you, we've had setting conversations. It's not like we've not gone into details or whatever, but that was how I was able to pay off my car.
Also,
Yeah.
one thing that like we're not talking about here is the I didn't want to call it the black tax, but is it the firstborn? Like
Yeah.
there's so much that we've spent on others
Mm,
in this time,
yeah.
and when you start to think about that versus other people, like the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah. I can't
well,
even go into that. So
not enough time.
we
Next
don't have
time.
enough time. But even to your point, like I obviously planning and everything, so I'm like on this strict budget. but like literally Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever the math is. I've taken people to dinner, and I'm like, well, because life is on the one hand about living, I will not spend that amount on myself. I like you mentioned, I will not spend that amount on myself. It's not even. I don't have a Chanel bag or any kind of any of it. I don't have.
Hey, are you listening?
What did you say?
No,
I didn't hear you. But just enjoy. I mean, personality wise as well. It's just that kind of thing. But I did that, and so now I'm looking back at my budget. I'm like, did you say that you're not going to do this thing and do this thing and do like So to your point about black tax, like it is what it is. I mean, some we have to obviously do better on budget, but I do want to tell people like really, really, really and truly, if you're listening to this, try with the index funds. This is different from your 401k. I still even do the bare minimum on my 401k. I'm looking to make some changes now, but I think that that is one way. And I mean, there might be consequences of taking it out of your stocks or taking it out of your index funds, but for the most part, it's still something you have access to, and that is getting high interest rates compared to this thing. But to your point about personal financial advisor, we actually saw it while we were doing our marriage counseling workbook, and they're like, consider, a personal financial advisor. And I was thinking to myself, oh, do we actually really need that? But now that you're talking about it, I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe this is still something, it doesn't matter how quote unquote small, maybe even starting small. And again, to the listeners, it might just be a friend, somebody that that is already doing this, and they're willing to take a discount.
if I can even take it a step further, I would say for a married couple personally, I think you need a financial advisor,
Mm,
need a marriage advisor. Like you're going to school for
yeah.
so many things. Financial advisor, the marriage, the child rearing, like it's like we get out of school and we just assume that like we're gonna know everything
Mm,
about
yeah.
all the remaining phases of life. And I'm
Mm,
starting to believe that like we really need education. The financial advisor thing is a bit of it's a minefield because the way it's set up, at least here in the US, is like a lot of them are whatever you're gonna pay a financial advisor for the advice is very little compared to what they earn when they sell you stuff,
that's fair.
right? And
That's fair.
so
I saw that.
there, unfortunately, even though we as financial professionals we have a duty to like recommend things that are good for you. It's a suitability thing that they call it.
Yeah.
But people will, and I've experienced it as my big self, knowing all the finance things, where what was recommended was probably not the best
Mm,
thing for me to do.
mm,
So it's a bit of a dance. I would say find somebody that like just helps you understand your picture and don't do anything that they tell you to do in the first
yeah.
year.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And see how dedicated they remain to you when you're not putting money in their pockets, and then start to
Mm,
make decisions.
okay. All right. You heard it from the best. I want to say, it's unfortunate because I know that there are a few people that are here that are listening that are in Nigeria. I'm not. I honestly want to say I'm not sure how to help in that investment place or area, but maybe what I can promise is to try and find somebody who does something like this, the personal financial advisor or something like that, that is in Nigeria, that might be able to shed some light, because obviously, again, we're over here, and so we kind of have an understanding of how it works over
It
here.
works the same way. Like I know people who are invested in, stocks and mutual funds and bonds and things like that. I mean, there was a time I was investing in Nigerian bonds because the returns were nice.
Nice.
Right? Like you're doing seeing 12% and like all of that. So there
Yeah.
was a time. So it exists in Nigeria as well. But
Okay.
I mean, the first thing is keeping your personal finances at a point where you can actually like take care of today,
Yeah.
bare bones without excesses, so
Yeah.
you can plan for the future.
Yeah.
So, and I think most people are still in phase one.
Yeah, yeah. And that's okay. And that's okay. But again, like I said, knowing how much I can spend on coffee, if you put that $50 away somewhere, I still saw something on Instagram that said, five friends put $50 away for 2 years and they bought an apartment thing that they're renting. And I mean, I know what rent costs over here. So if they're, sharing, if even if it's a five apartments, what they're making a year, what they're able to share, it's more than it's more than they would get,
So
if they did not put $50 away, and literally $50 away. So I think we need to start thinking about that. You and a couple friends put $50 away. What can you put that money into? Yeah, let's not just be carrying along because, oh, things are hard. Things are the funny thing is, I don't want to say things are always going to be hard, but things are hard, like for everybody at almost every level, right? Things are hard. So again, to your point, yeah, I'm thinking that you're over there making so much more money, but things are hard at your level the same way it's going to be hard at Bill Gates level, or Warren Buffett's level, right? There are things that he has to deal with as well. So I
all
think,
the people you're putting.
I
I love
mean,
it.
you gotta have goals, you gotta have dreams. But it's true though, because I mean, think about the fact that you have to think about how much you're going to give, and how much I can imagine that it weighs. It may not be the money hard, but the responsibility hard, the choices hard, and those kind of things. So I just think, we can make better decisions. And if you're like me, start to make coffee at home. It works.
Very
It works.
proud of that one because Starbucks was making bank.
Like, no, so much so that I went to go and get stocks in Starbucks. So I'm like, I don't care if it's
Love
one. I'm like, I don't care if it's one. Like, I have to get something back from you guys. What are you talking about? But no. Okay, I feel like we can go on forever and ever and ever. We talked about most of the things that I wanted to make sure that we spoke about. But let me see. There's something else I'm trying to recall. Oh, one thing that we didn't talk about, and I really like, to always talk about a lot in my show, is just faith, right? Because again, with all of
Mhm.
these things,
Yeah.
we've been through many faith seasons. Obviously, there's the waiting season, again, in this case, whether it's for a job, even though sometimes I really don't understand what that waiting season is, that is called when it comes to marriage, because your time is your time. But still, however way we call it, it's a waiting season because you want it, right? And or you think, or there's an expectation of, this is the time that is supposed to be, and things like that. Obviously, in our case, like the visa situation, the passport situation, all of that, those have been such waiting seasons for us. And so I just wanted to, get your view as to how your faith stayed strong, or, or even in the times when it did not stay strong. What have you learned through all of that?
This is interesting. Okay, so the last episode that I actually listened to of your podcast was, I think, was Tosin. That's when you talked about fate a lot. She's the
Okay.
child
Yes,
who
yes,
came.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. That was a lot. So I think I would say one is, and I'm probably going to speak about it just purely from like a Bible based like
Mhm.
faith. You know, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about like
Yeah,
positive, whatever.
yeah.
Like it's a Bible based faith. Faith is a muscle.
Mm.
There is the gift of faith, and then there is faith that is sort of a muscle, something that you work. I believe that I have the gift of faith. I think it comes from my mom and her mom. Like they were, I don't know if you've met people who just like, just are quite stubborn about something going to happen. It's like,
Mm.
I'm going to get this job or this is going to happen. And they just have this like ox like this is going to happen, and they act like it's going to happen, they talk like it's going to happen, they pray like it has to happen, and they actually like even get the boldness to actually believe that, oh, this is, so I think there's that gift of faith,
Right.
and then there's also like the muscle of working faith. This is a different season for me because like even though I'm a morning person, I get up early, but up until this point living in California, and it's because of the time difference and like whatever, like I've been someone that like has mostly spent most of my mornings in the Bible, reading the Bible, praying and whatever. And now I've been a Christian, like I've been a Christian since I was 9 years old. So when you think about like all the years, and it's not been every day, there have been seasons that me and God have been like, whatever. But when you think about like all that knowledge, all that time with God, all that time spent, I know my Bible, like I know every front to back many times. Sometimes in a month, I used to do this challenge where every January read the Bible from. I know what's in there. I know what God says. I know what God can do. Like just from the Bible, like I've seen it, I know it. And because I've like spent a lot of time getting it in, it's here. Like
Yeah.
that's something that nobody can take away from you. So that's one. And then on the other hand, I've just seen God do things,
Yeah.
right? Like this is me. Oh, I mean, this is something that we don't even talked about. Like I have a sickle cell trait. Like
Mm.
my like and it came. So when you move to Canada, because Canada's healthcare system, is a bit different from the states, so like basic healthcare is covered. When I had my first doctor visit, and she was like, oh, you have a sickle cell trait. We have like there's a special red blood cell clinic in
Mm.
Canada for people like me.
Mm.
So I had to go to this red blood cell clinic because they monitor you, because like they really want to, like, you have priority access to healthcare and all of that. And like my doctors used to be so confused because I remember going to an appointment and saying, hey, I need to be out of here soon because I have a flight. I had a flight to New York. It's like, oh, you're flying a long distance. Have you requested oxygen? Like, have you? And I'm like, he's like, "But just people with your blood type like usually like need oxygen to fly." I'd never heard of that before. Like I've spent one night in a hospital my entire life, and it's because I was having a sickle cell crisis. My parents were away. My grandmother was watching us. I don't know if it was my first crisis, a pain crisis, and like she didn't know what to do, so she took all of us kids. Like my brother was on her back, like she held it, and we went to the hospital. But like it's manageable.
Mm.
Stress, dehydration, all of that. I started to feel my joints, in
Yeah.
pain. Like it's just a pain. It's manageable. That in itself is like it's crazy. Like I
Yeah.
shouldn't be living such a healthy whatever life. And like people, when people get to kind of know my medical history, they're very confused about that. So me myself am like a miracle, just every day,
Yeah.
existence. And then things like, I mean, imagine a girl from Ilorin, like, yeah, I'm smart and like my parents are smart, but like I am quite literally the most senior black woman in
Mm.
America who works for Lazard. And first of all, that's crazy. Like
Mm.
on my part, on my part, because it's like we should really take out all the names of all these companies. But just to say that, like, it's God just moves. God just does like really amazing things when you allow Him to.
Yeah.
Right? So knowing all of this stuff, now coming back to like how do I maintain faith, is like I know too much,
Yeah.
right? To not at least have the beginning instances of the faith. Now,
Yeah.
how do you keep the faith? Like I said, faith is just a muscle. I posted something on Instagram a few months ago that I'd lost my wallet in Central Park, and like I actually found it in like, and someone returned it. What was the faith exercise in that? It was getting a thought almost out of nowhere that like, what if I call the lost and found? I didn't even know what the lost and found of Central Park. I googled it and it was like, oh, it's the police precinct. But like, who would think to like actually do that? It's like
Mm.
asking yourself, what if? Like there was a time I needed a visa, and it was like, oh, for BC's wedding.
Mm.
Oh, before BC's wedding, my visa was denied. And then
Mm.
like in New York, because they were like, oh, you're going to Rome and you're going to Portugal, but like you're spending 4 days, go to the Italian. Like it was just like I couldn't get a visa.
Mm.
And I went to another embassy. I was like, I need an emergency visa. This is where I'm going, whatever. And I need it before Friday.
Mm.
Friday. But it's like it's a muscle that you have to walk. The first time you say, what if this actually happens? And like you actually sort of stick with it and see a result. The next time you're more likely to be like, what if this can actually happen? And then what
Mm.
if, and then what if, and then what if. But I think it starts with like knowing.
Yeah.
Like you have to know. And like nobody, yeah, you can read the Bible and like that's a very good way to like start to like get to know God. But like
Mm.
you actually have to like start recognizing it, start seeing it, start being around people that talk about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It grows by exposure, it grows by and it grows by exercise. So I don't know, like my cousin, like every when I tell my cousin Dupe, like I tell her she's not on social media, so I feel like we catch up and like tell her all the like she's just like, why is your life always like a movie? Like why is every no high stakes? But then it works out in the end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And because it works out, the next time I can be chuckle headed enough to be like, you know what, we're gonna try. Maybe
Exactly.
we're gonna try and like maybe that will happen. How did I end up in California? Like I used to come visit Cali and oh where is it? Oh my notebook. It's somewhere. I saw it the other day. I wish I could go get it. California just to visit because Fijimi had come here to work and I'd come, for the marriage day and so I'd been here a few times and I just kind of liked it and I didn't even know that I wrote it down, but like I processed a lot of my thinking and a lot of my
Yeah.
prayers and I'd written down, oh, this place is so nice. It kind of might be nice to like live here, whatever, whatever. And then that was it. I didn't work towards it. I just told God
Yeah.
could be nice. When I was interviewing for this job, my former boss had been like, "This is the next step in your career. You should go out and like have your own clients and like learn to raise money and all of that." So I was really considering this job. It made sense from a number of, and then a recruiter called me about a different role in
Mm.
California,
Mm.
and I was like, "Oh, what's the pay, whatever?" And she's like, they're thinking the comp package could be up to 1 million.
Mm.
I was like, when we talked about the role, I mean, I gave her feedback again because I'm in my DGAF phase. I'm like, yeah, the role you're describing, it sounds like you need to hire 3 people
Mm.
because you needed a person to do this and like hire their boss, hire their direct reports. I'm like, you need to hire 3 people.
Yeah.
But so like your 1 million package does
Mm.
not
Doesn't
interest.
look like. Yeah.
But when I was in California, I was like, does God want me to go? But I didn't even think about it. And then I started this job thinking I was going to be in New York.
Yeah.
So after I started, they're like, California is yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've seen that stuff and like I don't rate myself enough, I guess is the way to put it, to think that any of this stuff I've achieved because I know anything or I'm smart or whatever.
Mm.
Like I very much know myself and like all my inadequacies. So I'm very quick to like pick the thread that God is doing this, God is doing that. And
Yeah.
because of that, like I just lean into those risky things. Like I say yes, I take the
Mm.
risk, I try it. I
Yeah.
just I live. I don't know if that made sense, but
It makes
that's my
absolute
whole
sense.
was just yeah, my
Yeah.
rebel streak. Yeah,
Yeah.
is that fake.
No, it makes absolute sense. I think you and I have had this discussion that, I had a job, obviously thought this was finally, this was the one, and it was going to take me to where I needed to go to. And not just financially, but even just work,
Career.
my
Yeah,
career, like what I liked, what I enjoyed, and everything. And with all of that, I think the lesson, and the same way you just said, is that what, one, if you trust God, move, take the risk, and anything that happens, know that He's in every step of the way, one way or the other. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. Like I think I used to be so conscious about, oh my gosh, if I lose a job, oh my gosh, if I lose a job. Now I'm just like, if I lose a job, I don't even think I'm that skilled in anything, honestly, if I'm being very honest. But I'm like, I will get a job. Like I will find something, and I will find something that, because in that place, especially, and to your point, right? Everywhere else. But sometimes I think for a lot of people, you have a gift of faith in one particular area, maybe more than the other. So if you, especially for us, if you have it in that one area, put it in every other area. I think for me, even when it came to marriage, for example, it's like eventually that was what it was. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to, I wrote something down. The rest was because, like, literally. And one of the things I realized was, it was at that point that I was ready. It was at that point that I wrote it down. And it was at that point that God was like, okay, she's ready. She has her faith. Let's move. Because, The Bible tells us that faith pleases God, right? And so we have to get to that point where we have that faith that pleases God. I think that's the most important thing in all that I've heard you say, for example, because you're right. If you love God enough, you spend time in the word, but you have to activate that, use that, let that faith please God. He's going to give you what you need. So then, on the one hand, when you are not getting that one thing, say for you now, for example, if it's marriage, if it hasn't come, do you feel like, no, I'm using that as an example because I have people, okay, another example I could use was people that have been waiting for kids, right? Like you've
Yeah.
been married, you did all the right things. I always,
Mhm.
I talk about, there's people that, you did all the right things, married as a virgin, no, all of that good stuff. And then, you're still waiting on kids. I don't think it can be that faith hasn't pleased God. Your faith hasn't pleased God. I think sometimes
No.
God wants you to wait. He has whatever plans he has for
So
you.
you and I have had this conversation before. I'm very happy you're getting married now because we have this idea of timelines.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I want to be sensitive because there are some things that like you need in an exact time. But even that, I think sometimes we need to like, does this really need to be in this exact time?
Mm.
But put that aside. We have we have timelines. I remember I used to fight you because you always used to say, I'm supposed to be.
But it wasn't
And I was
marriage,
like,
it was work.
no, you even said that with the whole marriage thing once. And I was like,
Oh,
said
okay.
who says? Like,
But it was
you
mostly my
it
career
was.
because I was
Yeah,
like, God, when?
like this idea of like I should be
Yeah,
X or like, it's like, first of all, says who,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And like, I mean, I've had my heart broken on so many different things, work things, financial things, the relationship front. I can't really say I've had my heart broken on the relationship front because I've not really pursued the manly relationships, and we can talk
yeah,
about that another time, probably. And a lot of times when I've been disappointed like that is because like I wanted something, I wanted it in a time, and it
yeah,
didn't happen in that time. And
yeah,
so, my thinking was that, God didn't want it. But I believe, and I think we can all sort of walk with God, walk with God enough
mm,
to get to the point where you like so what I used to struggle with a little bit is that I believe God can, I believe
mhm,
God wants to,
yeah,
but a lot of times I didn't believe that like I could either faith enough, pray enough, be wise enough to be in the position where it all clicks together.
mm,
And I've now gotten to a point where it's like where I know that there's nothing I can do. There's no amount of silliness or stupidity that I can have to
yeah,
miss it when
yeah.
God wants to. I'm not big enough to like
Stop God.
stop God
Absolutely.
doing what he needs to do in the time that he
Yeah,
needs to do it. So if it doesn't happen in that time, God's just not ready,
yeah,
right? And like I can sit with that. I can go to God and be like, I'm very disappointed. I'm
yeah,
mad at you,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like you told me that you care about me. You told me that you would be there for me, and like you've broken my heart,
yeah,
right? And I can
yeah,
allow God. And I've had times where, like when I was looking for a job, because it was a whole year. First of all, I knew from January
yeah,
that I needed a new job, and then I had to stay in this job until December because like it was just a tough market. Like
yeah,
election year, Trump, like nobody was trying to like hire a girl that needed a green card,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so, like, it was a year plus. At first I thought, screw them, I'll get a job. And then it
yeah,
became like, oh, this is like, it's not going to happen, right? And I remember I had this friend, Ariana, remember quite clearly. I think she reached out, texted me, hey, just thinking about you. How's the search? And it's like, me and God are not having, like, you pray today, I'm not praying, right?
mm,
Like, you know, and so I've definitely had those times, but I think I've gotten to a point where, like, I really believe, like, God is just so good. And
yeah,
like God thinks about my life and like the next step and what's going to happen more than I do,
yeah,
right? And he already sees it clearly, but he's still thinking about like how can we like, and God has my sense of humor and my sense of timing too. So like everything is so personalized to me.
Yeah.
But I know I'm from a place of like years of relationship,
Yeah.
right? And everybody sort of has to get to that themselves. So yeah, it gets hard,
Yeah.
right? But what you can do when you are disappointed is disengage,
Yeah.
right? Because then you're taking yourself out of the race, right?
Yeah.
You're not staying on it. You're not, and when people say things, all this stuff about like saying, there was this time when Nigerians, everything, it is well, it is well.
It is my favorite word or my favorite phrase. I say it all the time.
Yeah, yes, you can whatever yourself, but and you're the psychologist, so but what saying that does, it's not just blindly saying it, it's like
Yeah.
now starting to align your brain and your like,
Yeah.
if you say it as well, you'll
Yeah.
probably think it as well, you behave like it as well, and then it
Yeah.
becomes well, right? So there's a little bit of that. So when we get disappointed, if we disengage and allow other things, or maybe God doesn't care, it's not the right time, whatever, we start behaving
Yeah. Opposite of
in
that.
opposite to what we want, and then it kind of sets us back, right? So that, I don't know
I
if
think that's
that's,
an important point though
yeah,
about the stepping back
that's what
because I
faith
mean,
is like, that's the spiritual
yeah.
merging with like the psychological, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. No, I agree 120%. The setting back, especially because I feel like, to your point, my thing was more time. Like, if I needed a job and I didn't have a way to pay my rent, my thing was, it's time. I'm sorry. Like, I still have to pay my rent, God. And so, if you're not answering on time, then, what am I supposed to do? And, in those moments, you set yourself back when you don't instead say, I don't care. I don't care. I know that come January 1st or whatever it is, my rent is going to be paid. And I think that's where, thank God I was finally able to move to because again, sometimes it's like, yes, the reality is the reality. The
yeah,
reality is the reality. It is so starkly clear, but you need to get to a point where that is happening. So again, I was thinking about it because I'm like, I never really felt like I was rushing or worried about marriage. But obviously, I would always say things like, you're supposed to, because in my mind, right, there's,
mhm.
season and time and all of this stuff. And I think, again, by the time I was done, well, maybe because you're a friend, I'll vent to you, for the most part, I don't really care. I'm not following anybody's time. But sometimes it just feels like the reality of things. And then again, like I said, once it was a turnaround on that situation and I'm not thinking about it and it's a faith that pleases God, it took all of months. Like, God is like, you're ready, I'm ready, let's go. And so we need to get to that point in our walk with God, like you mentioned. I think, just count on his word. He knows, okay, you have 3 months. You can't, like, after this 3 months, rent is rent is what's it called? Like, to your point now, you had a 1 year bonus. So he knew that you were all right, right? So you didn't even have any luxury of now saying, God is supposed to, that kind of thing. It's like, are you gonna trust me or not? So didn't I already take care of that situation? And I already, haven't I already planned for this time, for this season for you? And so that's a really good point. Okay, because clearly we're about to do 2 hours. I love it so much. But you get to ask me one question. We'll have to do a part two.
Yeah, this was fun. I mean, after I got over the nerves.
You
Mm.
see, I told you it's just a conversation with friends.
Okay, I had two questions, but I think
Okay.
one I'll ask in private and then one I'll ask in public. So, as a very smart, driven, beautiful, talented, friendly, whatever woman, other than finances, because I think we've uncovered that that's an area that you are trying to build up,
Mhm.
who or what intimidates you?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I ask good questions. I say people.
I think fitness people. I want to do
Mm.
better with my fitness, and I don't feel like I'm doing enough for my fitness. So I think that's one area. I know it's very random, but it's something that I'm very conscious about. I think in general, not conscious, but like I just want to do better, and I just find that
Yeah,
I'm
you're
not
like,
feel
I
like
should be able to do that.
yeah,
Not
exactly. And I feel like I'm not motivated enough. I'm saving all the things. I want to do all the things, but yet I'm not driven. Maybe not even motivated. Like I, I don't seem to be able to drive myself enough to do that. And that's something that bothers me a little because I feel like it also relates to maybe a sense of style and confidence that I don't feel like I have. So I think that's one. I will also say still though, like career wise, I still feel like I am on the bottom of the rung for lack of a better term. And particularly because I know that God has a plan. I'm just not clear what it is. Like I feel like I'm still not clear on what it like. You've given me 5 gifts, and I'm like, where am I supposed to be going? Which one is it? Like, So I'm working with what I can. Like, I'm doing what I know to do. I'm doing the right thing to do at the moment, but I feel like I know that there is more and I'm not sure where that place is. So when I see people really in their, you know, branding and confidence and doing all this, and I say branding because I mean, obviously it's because I'm seeing it because they're really
Mhm.
putting themselves out there. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, God. I mean, I feel like you said all these things and I've heard all these things and people tell me all these things all the time. And, I'm like, but I'm not sure I see the way or I'm not clear where the way is and how to get there. So, in a way, I feel like I will say, in all honesty, I'm very comfortable with myself. So, not too intimidated, but I do feel a sense of gripe, I will say, because I'm just like, I know I'm supposed to be doing something. I don't want to say as elevated because who cares? It's just as impactful. Maybe that's the word, impactful. And I'm like, God, I want to make that impact that I feel like you brought me onto this earth for. And so, in that sense, I'm a little like, okay, when, how do I move? How do I make it happen? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good question actually, and probably the first time I've articulated I've articulated it that way. So thank you. No, this was really really fun. I hope you guys all listen to the 2 hours. Don't be you have to listen to everything to get everything. So if you get to this part where you have listened to everything, I want you to type in the comments when it comes out. I listen to everything. Thank you so much, Dami. This was actually really fun, and we have to do a part two.
Okay.
We only got
Sure.
half of it.
Sounds good. I'm
All
saying it
right.
up further. Yes, I will. We'll do another one.
Yay. Thank you for joining me in today's episode. Just like you would share with friends about a great book you read, don't forget to share this if you enjoyed it. Connect with us on IG and Twitter at TWWPcast and get details on the website at worldwithoutpeople.org. And hey, remember to make loving others the story of your life. Until next time, this is the world without people.